The 2024 Chicago White Sox just finished an epically horrible season. 41 and 121. 41 wins, 121 losses, for a winning percentage of .253. Believe it or not, there's a team that is much worse in baseball history. The 1899 Cleveland Spiders finished an unbelievable 20 wins and 134 losses. Today I'm joined by my friend Sean, who brought this 1899 Cleveland team to my attention. Sean has long had a fascination with the Spiders. Sean, thanks for coming on again. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. Yesterday was exciting. It was a good baseball.
You could say your Braves got in dramatic fashion, and all is right with the world, right?
You just got to get in. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
So you initially brought the Cleveland Spiders to my attention. Honestly, I didn't know anything about it. So
I'll tell you honestly. Are you familiar with the website whatifsports.com?
Never heard of it.
I used to use that. It would be about 15 years ago now, but it was a sports simulation game. So you could take the 27 Yankees and you could match them up against the 54 Cleveland Indians, and it would do a simulation and generate a box score to say who would win in a 7-game series. So okay. I lost countless hours to that website just simulating various matchups. And I remember at one point someone did a tournament of, we're going to find out who the best teams in baseball history are, and we're going to find out the worst teams in baseball history. And when they did the simulation for the worst teams in baseball history, they said, we are excluding the 1899 Cleveland Spiders because they are so much worse than anyone else that's ever been, any other team that's ever been constructed, that we already know they're the worst team in baseball history. So they're not going to be in the tournament. They're the winner. We're just competing for the second worst team in the history of baseball. So that's kind of my first exposure to the 1899 Spiders. And then, read up on them, and it's become a point of fascination for me.
They were a competitive team leading up to 1899. They spent 2 years with the American Association, and then they had an opportunity to join the National League. And when they joined the National League, they were competitive. They were middle of the pack team, top 3-5 for a few years.
Yeah, they had a number of Hall of Famers on the team. They had the 3 Hall of Famers on that team were Bobby Wallace, Jesse Burkett, and Cy Young.
They had the man himself.
The one and only, yes.
Yeah.
So
they had a 23-year-old Jack Powell, who, by all accounts, was one of the better pitchers of that era. He went 23 and 15 in 1898 with 36 complete games, and he only threw 342 innings that year. But
he COVID.
But they had talent. Obviously, they had talent. They had so on the face of it, you may wonder, well, how the heck did a team with this many Hall of Famers end up being the worst team in baseball history? The way I understand it is that 1898 Cleveland team, despite them being a competitive team, they did not draw well. Attendance was an issue, and the St. Louis club became available because the owner of the St. Louis club was battling some legal issues. They had a fire break out in their ballpark early in 1898, and he was facing a number of lawsuits. There was a death, a number of injuries caused by the fire, and so that team ended up going up for sale. The owner, the Robeson brothers, acquired the St. Louis club for $40,000. So then they ended up with 2 teams in the National League.
Yeah.
So what would any normal businessman do if he had 2 teams?
Well, you do the logical thing. You decide which team has the better attendance, and you stack them with all the talent, and you dump everybody else onto the lesser team and feed them to the wolves.
That's right. That's exactly what happened, isn't it? So
exactly,
they moved all the talent to what you just said. They moved them to St. Louis because they drew better, and they let Cleveland die on a vine, essentially.
Yeah.
I had read that the attendance in Cleveland was so bad in 1899 that they started giving up some of their home games to play on the road so that they could at least recoup some money from the visiting team.
Yeah, it was actually because in those days gates were such a big part of how teams were compensated. The gates were so significant, that's how visiting teams were paid, that they were recognizing that, okay, Cleveland is literally drawing 100 fans to games. It doesn't cover the cost of our train tickets or our hotel accommodations, so we're not going to go to Cleveland anymore. So, yeah, about halfway through the year, basically Cleveland threw up their hands and said, fine, we're going to play the rest of the season on the road, which is astonishing to think about in today's context.
So I'm comparing the 2024 White Sox to the 1899 Spiders. So the 1899 Spiders finished 84 games back of first place. I wonder when they were eliminated. Did they even make it to that?
It feels like about June.
Then the White Sox, as bad as they were, they finished 53 games back, which is pretty epic. But man, 84.
You know, the Spiders were. It was a 12-team league. They were 35 games back of 11th.
Wow, but that's insane. But the White Sox won 4 games in a row at some point during the season. The 1899 Spiders, their longest win streak was 2 games. So at some point they managed to win back-to-back, and then that was it.
Only once all season did they win back-to-back games.
It is crazy.
Yeah, it was. They had losing streaks of 11 or more games 6 different times.
Wow.
In the course of the season. And really the only reason that's not higher is because there's a 24 game losing streak in there that could have easily been broken up into 2 11 gamers without any difficulty.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I did
it had to be.
I did some prorated calculations too, because just to give some perspective in comparison to the White Sox. Yeah. Everybody talks about, the worst team in the 20th century, the worst team since 1900, the worst team in the modern era. The reason being because if you go back 1 year prior, the Spiders blow them out of the water. If you adjust the Spiders for a 162 game schedule, they would have finished 21 and 141, which is 20 games worse than the White Sox just finished in the worst season in living memory. Again, 12-team league. They went winless against 2 teams for the entire season. At no point did they ever beat Cincinnati or Brooklyn.
The 1899 attendance at the St. Louis Perfectos games was 5 times what it had been the previous year in Cleveland, when Cleveland was a pretty decent team. So
well, and I looked this up beforehand too. The St. Louis attendance on the season was 374,000 fans. The Cleveland home attendance for the season was 6,088 fans. I love and obsess over this team, so the numbers are so astonishing that you just defy logic. Their run differential on the season was negative 723, which means they averaged losing by 4.69 runs a game. So if you had spotted them a 4-run lead every game all season, they would have finished below 500.
So just off the top of my head, I think the Braves this year gave up 600 and something runs total. So you're saying that they were outscored by 700 runs?
Yeah, so they allowed 1,252 runs.
Good Lord.
And scored only 529.
Yeah, I believe the scoring part, but man, so they just had, I wonder if it was well, it's probably impossible to know if it was just horrific defense or if it was just horrible
pitching. Get to that. I'll get to that. I'll jump into their offense. Their best hitter was a man by the name of Tommy Dowd, who finished the season with a 668 OPS. By comparison, we go back to the White Sox of the 2021 season, or this year's White Sox. They were historically inept, and they have 6 players who hit better than 668 OPS. And again, this is the best hitter on the Spiders. Their first baseman had a 593 OPS. He hit a total of 22 extra base hits in 127 games. This is a premier power position. The entire team hit 12 home runs on the season. It was a different era, but at the same token, Bobby Wallace, who they traded to St. Louis, hit 12 home runs on his own. The league leader in home runs that year hit 25, so he hit more than double the entire Cleveland Spiders total.
Yeah, that's more than I would have expected for the 1890s. But so they've traded away a guy who had had as many home runs as the whole team.
Yeah. So anybody who says Babe Ruth was the first guy to hit more home runs than an entire team is forgetting about the Cleveland Spiders.
Oh, good trivia.
So that's the offense, and that might have been the strongest part of their team. Their defense, their shortstop committed 81 errors. For perspective, in 2024, the league leader in errors was Ellie De La Cruz with 29 errors. So their shortstop had 81 errors. Their second baseman had 31 errors. Their first baseman had 30 errors. They had a utility man who spent most of his time in the outfield with 28 errors in 116 games for a 908 fielding percentage, which again, most of his time was in the outfield where it's almost impossible to pick up errors.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we've gone through hitting and fielding. Again, those are the strong suits of the team. They had unquestionably the worst pitching staff in the history of baseball. Their ace was a guy, Jim Huey, who finished the season 4-30 with a 5.41 ERA. And he was very clearly their ace. They had Charlie Kepner, who was the only other pitcher to reach 4 wins, went 4-22. Frank Bates went 1-18 with a 7.24 ERA. Crazy Schmidt went 2-17. And one of the great names I love, Harry Cauliflower, went 1-11 with an 8.17 ERA. And he pitched 98 innings in that time. He hit more batters than he struck out. And, they tried other guys, but they were somehow even worse. So there was a guy, Harry Maupin. He only played 3 games. He went 0-3, 12.6 ERA, a 2.48 WHIP, and 30 ERA plus.
A lot of men on the bases.
A lot of men on the bases, and he wouldn't get any of them out.
He almost averaged a bases loaded scenario every inning, is what you're saying.
Pretty close. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around just how astonishingly bad these players really were. They couldn't do anything right, and there's a reason that they are so far and away the worst team in baseball history. And really, looking through their roster, they probably had one guy who deserved to be in the majors. It was an old catcher named Chief Zimmer. Ironically enough, not Native American. They just called him Chief. But when they did the purge at the start of the season, he was, I think, 37 or 38 years old. He said, "Can you just leave me here? I want to wrap up my career. I don't want to move."
Didn't want to move,
Yeah, so he played 20 games. He hit 342 with an 887 OPS, which is a legitimate hitter. The Cleveland management decided he was too good and sold him to St. Louis. Sold him to Louisville. So, yeah,
poor guy. Well, I felt bad for the White Sox. There were a number of guys on the White Sox that I liked. Guys who used to be Braves, Nicky Lopez, Mike Soroka. I just felt bad for them. Bad situation.
Yeah.
I don't know what the situation is with the ownership in the White Sox. So it's one thing to be an owner and to purposely take talent from one team and divert it to another. It's another thing to be an owner that's so inept that you can't even field a team that they can win.
Well, that's it. This is the one area I'll give the White Sox the advantage is. It was very clear why Cleveland stunk. They unloaded everybody who had any talent. The Chicago White Sox didn't have any excuse. They're not an expansion team. They didn't sell anybody with a pulse in the offseason. They were just so inept at development and talent management and roster management that they just came by naturally.
They were trying, and they were that bad. Like, they were trying to win. They're 18th in payroll. So, I mean, there are teams below them. Listen to who's got a smaller payroll than them. Kansas City, playoff team. Milwaukee, division winner. Baltimore, playoff team. Cleveland, division winner. Detroit, playoff team. So, yeah, something's wrong in Chicago.
Yes,
something about what they're doing. Crazy. Cleveland. Have you ever been to Cleveland?
No, I haven't.
You're fortunate. So I say this as a guy who was born in Detroit, but I'm joking because Cleveland and Detroit kind of have this brother versus brother attitude of you're worse than we are. In Detroit, we always felt like At least we're not Cleveland. And Cleveland has this whole "we're not Detroit." There's even that. I'm sure you've seen that video on YouTube, right? At least we're not Detroit, something like that.
Fun times in Cleveland again. Still Cleveland. Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit. We're not Detroit.
So, as bad as that Cleveland team was, I do want to say they were not outdone by the 2008 Detroit Lions, who went 0-16.
Perfect.
Yeah, 0-16, baby. So, but Cleveland would not be outdone, and the 2017 Browns also went 0-16.
Yes.
So now we share that.
Retaliate.
How does that compare, Sean, to hockey? What's the worst hockey team? Do you know?
Oh, the worst hockey team would be the expansion Washington Capitals. And I don't remember the record offhand. I know they won exactly 1 road game all season, which they played, I think, 40 road games a season at the time. So it would be 1-39. And it was their last road game of the year. And I know they spray painted a garbage can silver and carried it around the ice like it was the Stanley Cup.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Love doing this.
Great to have you on. You're now a 3-peater.
I think that gets me a tie clip, doesn't it? Or is that
we'll see if the staff can find something to send me.
No, this has been great. I'm always happy to come on and
all right, thanks, man.
Shoot the breeze about baseball history.